So for some time, I've been saying that Russia is not a conservative, traditional values kind of nation like Tucker Carlson might lead you to believe. What it is might be a reaction to Western liberalism, but that's not the same as actually being conservative in any meaningful way. And this is important because if you are a conservative Republican like I am, you need to understand what this article is saying. So we're going to work through this article and we're going to talk through this. If you don't know who I am, my name is Gerdes. I am a conservative Christian Republican. I'm like the stereotype of the Christian right. Like pre-Donald Trump, I'm Christian. I'm conservative. I don't like MAGA. What they're trying to do is populist because that's not really conservative values. I don't like when they, take Christian kind of stuff and kind of embrace it, even if they don't really mean it, because the Bible is actually meaningful to me. It's not that you sell a Trump Bible or whatever else along those lines. It's like, I really prize my faith. And I think that evangelical Christians are being misled by those that are talking about Russia being somehow conservative and traditional values, and they're really not. Okay, let's get into the article here. American Christians and conservatives have been fooled by Putin's strongman posture, mistaking ruthlessness for moral fortitude. Well, that's quite a statement. Can he back it up? That's really what's important here. In recent years, some American conservatives have developed a misplaced admiration for Vladimir Putin's Russia, viewing it as a bastion of traditional values and a counterbalance to liberal excesses in the West. I think that line right there is the most important line in the entire article, because what Putin is doing is saying, the West is decadent, the West is this, the West is that. And American conservatives also may feel that the left is chasing these excesses, but that does not mean that what Putin is doing to, push back against the West is the same thing as what you feel about the excesses in your own society. And that's very important. It's important to make this distinction. So this is a misconception. And if you understood what Russia was actually doing, you wouldn't cozy up to them because they're worse than what the left is doing in the US. There's a misconception. Putin's Russia is not a traditionalist paradise. Putin's regime is often mislabeled as ultra-right and conservative due to its strongman image and opposition to liberal ideologies. But that's how liberals have framed Putin, and I think that might actually get us into a wrong place. And it's not right in the conservative, small government, moral rights kind of sense. It's authoritarian, and that's very different. These superficial stances mask a deeper alignment with the authoritarian and collectivist tendencies of the Bolshevik era. Like, I know that if you're conservative, you're not thinking, the collectivism of the Bolsheviks was a really good thing. You're not thinking that at all. I know you. I am you. There are high rates of abortions. Is that what you're thinking? High rates of divorce. Is that what you're thinking? Suicides. State economic intervention. You're not for any of those things. The so-called revival of the Russian Orthodox Church, moreover, is largely superficial. Like, you would think from the outside looking in, from the things that you're hearing from Tucker Carlson and others, that, they're just reviving the church, and isn't it wonderful? Nope. Regular attendance is below 2%, and less than 5% of Russians have read the Bible. Like, okay, let's check that. So we can just Google that. Church attendance in Russia. Very few Russians would be religious. It has been found that between 0.5 and 2% of people in big cities attend Easter services, and overall just between 2% and 10% of the population are actively practicing Orthodox Christians. The facade of religiosity contrasts sharply with the genuine religious commitment found in countries like Ukraine. So let's compare that to church attendance in Ukraine. 72% of the population avowed fidelity to Eastern Orthodox Church. 54% of Ukrainians proclaimed adherence to the Orthodox Church in Ukraine. Now, that didn't tell us what the weekly church attendance was, but that's significant, right? So we asked the question a different way, and we get this answer. 15.6% of Ukrainians go to church once a week or more often, 18% once a month. So how does that compare to the US? 20% of Americans go to church every week, 41% once a month. So Ukraine is far more religious than Russia, but yet we had this image in our head that it's this bastion of traditional values. It's not. What religion is taking root in Russia? But what's actually happening in Russia is that in Russian regions like Chechnya and Dagestan, increasingly replacing secular law with Sharia law. So as far as religion goes, that's what's happening there. Putin's Russia exhibits many characteristics of its Soviet predecessor, cloaked in statist imperialist rhetoric. The regime's economic policy, social control mechanisms, and geopolitical strategies are reminiscent of the Soviet Union's totalitarian reproach. Now I ask you, if you can remember the Soviet Union, were you in favor of the Soviet Union? That's not conservative, that's authoritarian and totalitarian. Conservatives who criticized these policies started to face severe repression. Major right-wing leaders who refused to support the Kremlin's anti-Western campaigns have been imprisoned, exiled, or killed. That's what's happened in Russia, this bastion of traditional values. Now, Western liberals who are focused on their globalist agenda often misinterpret or intentionally oversimplify the nature of Putin's regime, labeling it as conservative or right-wing phenomenon. So they misinterpret it, then we misinterpret what they have misinterpreted, and then we think that they're traditional when they're really authoritarian, and it's not the same thing. Mislabeling inadvertently aids Putin by disarming genuine conservatives like me who might otherwise oppose Putin. So this is really important because in the Republican Party, we've been sold a bill of goods about what Russia's really like. And we blame Ukraine for clamping down on religion when they have clamped down on the Russian Orthodox Church that has been used as a conduit for Putin's war and propaganda and arms and other things. But you fail to look at how in occupied parts of Ukraine that Russia controls, they're literally persecuting Christians in significant ways. Many Western conservatives, misled by liberal narratives, may find themselves sympathizing with a regime that fundamentally opposes their core values. That's what's happening here. To effectively counter Putin's propaganda, it's imperative to emphasize and uphold genuine traditional values, like what? Moral integrity, national sovereignty. True conservatism champions moral integrity, but Putin's regime sacrifices these principles for geopolitical gain. Who's the aggressor and who's the victim? The aggressor is Russia invading a sovereign democratic country that's trying to become more democratic. And Russia doesn't like that because Russia has grown more authoritarian over time. Individual freedoms. Genuine conservatives value individual freedoms, which Putin systematically undermines. Are you for freedom of speech? Are you for freedom of religion? Right? If you are, as a conservative, you shouldn't be supporting Russia, who undermines both of these. From suppressing free speech and political dissent to controlling religious expression, Putin's government exemplifies the antithesis of conservative principles of liberty and personal responsibility. Grassroots empowerment, supporting grassroots movements and individuals who advocate for conservative values within Russia but reject the anti-Western dictatorship is crucial. Now, this includes backing dissidents who expose the regime's hypocrisies. What happens if you speak out against the government in the United States? Nothing. You have freedom of speech. What happens if you speak out against the government in Russia? You're in jail or far worse. In America, it's vital to learn from these experiences and to recognize the dangers of romanticizing foreign authoritarian figures. The allure of Putin as a defender of traditional values is a dangerous illusion. And again, it is an illusion. Start doing your homework, and I'll help you with that. Ask me questions about it. True conservatism is grounded in moral integrity, national sovereignty, individual freedoms, values that Putin's regime consistently undermines. It's time to amplify voices that expose the anti-Christian nature of Putin's regime. It truly is anti-Christian as well as anti-conservative. It's authoritarian. As Alexander Solzhenitsyn once warned, the Soviet Union is not an example of socialism that is yet to be built, but of socialism that has already been built. This is what socialism does in its expressed form. This insight is crucial when we discern the true nature of Putin's regime, which is not a future hope, but a current reality of a false transformation of socialism under the guidance of a former officer of the communist secret police. And that's what Putin really is. Amplify the voices that expose the anti-Christian nature of Putin's regime. We must stand firm against the false romance of authoritarianism, championing the values that uphold freedom, morality, and national dignity. Now, Who wrote this article? His name is Yuri Terekov. Yuri earned his Master's in Arts degree in International Relations in Poland. He's worked with various notable figures in the Russian opposition, including Garry Kasparov, Alexei Navalny, and Mikhail Khodorkovsky. So he knows what he's talking about here. Look, I'm telling you, Putin is not a defender of traditional conservative values. That's not who he is. He's misunderstood. He's an authoritarian strongman. Those are two different things. You want to know how you can tell whether he is or is not? Go back to the old Ronald Reagan joke. So an American and a Russian are talking, and the American says, our system is better. I can go to the White House. I can pound my fist on the table and say, Mr. Reagan, I don't like the way that you're running this country. And the Russian says, so what? I can do the same thing. He said, you can? He said, yeah, I can go to the Kremlin, I can pound my fist on the desk, and I can say, Mr. Gorbachev, I don't like the way that Ronald Reagan is running his country. But you get the point, because he couldn't say that about his system, and that's the difference. All right, my friends, that's all that I have. Tell me what you thought about this below in the comments. I'll be reading them. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.